Hello and welcome to the RPG Talk Show. I am your host, Hawk Robinson, with co-host
John Wilker.
This show discusses weekly news, information, commentary, discussion, and debate about the effects of all role-playing game formats and their potential uses for professional, educational, recreational, and therapeutic goals. The RPG Talk Show is not about the latest modules and releases. There are plenty of sources for that information. We will mention such releases when related to the aforementioned topics, however. You can learn more about the RPG Talk Show, hosts, guests, and archives of previous episodes on our website at rpgtalkshow.com. You can follow us on Twitter at RPG Talk Show. You can catch our show live on twitch.tv/RPG Research Thursdays, 4 to 5 p.m. Pacific Time, and chat with us during the live broadcast. RPG Research Patreon supporters can access the recorded episodes a month or more, way more, before they are available to the general public as a thank you for your support. Role-playing game formats include the original tabletop RPG, usually referred to as RPG or tRPG, please not two T's. Live-action role-playing, aka LARP or lrpg, electronic or eRPG, solo adventure books or modules, SABM, and hybrid RPGs, HRPG. This episode is sponsored by the wonderful Patreon supporters for the nonprofit RPG Research. We also are sponsored by RPG Therapeutics, LLC, and ttrpg.com. You can learn more about the RPG Research, the nonprofit 501c3 research and human services organization studying the effects of all RPG formats and their potential to improve lives at rpgresearch.com, and about RPG Therapeutics, LLC, the for-profit professional services company, rpgtherapeutics.com, and ttrpg, who provides Braille dice and other accessible equipment and such to help those with visual impairments and other accessibility needs be able to participate in role-playing games at dotsrpg.com.
I was going to show you something, but it's during screen, so
and we're all wearing proudly our pins that dotsrpg was very kind to give us. We also have the multiple little icons of the cute little dragon in multiple sizes. Thank you so much, Jess, for those. And then we also got the little dots candy.
You're right, yeah.
Custom for that, and we got a little pen. We got all sorts of doodads and gigas and wonderful things from them. Great folks, check them out. They do have a Patreon. Support them on their Patreon. So our show varies each week, but a typical format includes the latest general RPG news related to our focus on role-playing games and research, community response and discussion, RPG-related theory and application discussions, the latest updates on RPG Research, the RPG Bus, the RPG Trailer, the RPG Tour, the RPG Publishers, and much, much more. For today's news, though, let's go ahead and, John, take it away.
Yes, we're going to start with something we've been talking about, I think, for the last couple, just the last one, because we didn't have them before that.
Yeah.
So, Critical Role, Legend of Vox Machina, Animated Special, which is now Animated Series. They haven't changed the title on their thing here, but we're at $7.264 million.
They are smoking.
Their next stretch goal is 7.5. So they're $24,000 away from their next stretch goal. But, so let's give you some statistical information about that. This puts them at number 9 in the top 10 of all Kickstarters ever.
So just a week ago, they had just hit 16 while we were doing the show.
Correct.
Or 15. It hit 15th place while we were doing the show.
Now they're number 9. They actually have a long way to go before they can get number 8.
Yeah, that's a big jump to number 1, which was 20 million something?
20.34 million number 1. Right now they have to jump from the 7.07 of the 7th continent, which is the
But this tells you, when we talk about the RPG professional, how much this industry is maturing.
Yeah.
5 years ago, they would not have been able to get that level of success.
No, nobody would have had a reason to want to.
Well, even if the show had been running,
right,
things just weren't quite there yet. It's a timing thing, and now this shows how much more the market is maturing, and how much more people want potentially premium role-play experience. And often this is used as the market. Now, there's problems with that. We've talked about that before. And even he talks about how, hey, whoa. This is an entertainment thing, and this is our particular play style. This is not what the bar you should measure all role-playing game experiences from, because it isn't. It's an entertainment stream, not a recreation.
And we have professional actors here. You're not going to find those.
At least voice actors, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. No, and we've talked about that before. We don't need to rehash that. You can catch that on previous episodes. In fact, I think I've written whole blog postings and such about it, too, to help clarify. But power to them. It's awesome. They've raised awareness. It's been very beneficial to the industry as a whole. And it's awesome to see. So they're now, 10 days into their 45-day?
Yeah, they have.
They were 3 days in a week ago, so. Just doing the math there.
35 days left to go.
Yep,
So they're
10
just
days.
a little more than a month.
Yep. Awesome.
If they don't make 8 million, it's going to be a surprise.
Yeah.
They are also the third fastest Kickstarter to hit 1 million.
Nice.
19 minutes is the record, and they are at 1 hour. So they're just behind a video game called Shenmue 3. It's an action-adventure oriental video game. Now, there is news because of this, because it's hitting the regular news.
Mm-hmm.
This article happens to be on Polygon. Critical Role's massive crowdfunding success is kickstarting some interesting conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And long story short, they talk about the statistics on how Critical Role is in the largest Kickstarter category for games, which is $896.75 million in earnings.
Mm-hmm.
Successful Tabletop, great power. So retail sales in millions. U.S. Canada game sales 2017. Total hobby games 1,545 millions.
Yep.
Role-playing games is only 55 million.
Yep. But you say only. Let me put this in perspective, because remember, this is part of our presentation.
Right.
I've been tracking the financials of this for decades. In 2009, when the market, 2008 and 9, the U.S. economy, much of the world economy crashed.
Mm-hmm.
And video game sales have been going climb. They were up around 17 billion or so in the U.S. and plummeted, and over the next 10 years dropped to about 15 billion. And that included mobile devices and everything. But hobby gaming, board games, card games, role-playing games, all of that, were only around 300 million around that time. So about 10 years ago. We're only around 300 million.
Right.
Versus the 15 billion, 17, 15 billion. As soon as the market crashed, you saw, because I've always argued that a big part of that transition was also economic, because people didn't have the spare money. There were a lot of things. There were social things going on as well.
Right.
But also, people couldn't afford all the internet hardware, software upgrades of video games, etc. And so they need to get more bang for the buck. We saw the return of the family game night, things like that.
International Tabletop Day.
Yeah, all that stuff. So a lot of things. It's a lot of things. It's multivariate. It's not a single variable. But a big part was the economy crash. It instigated people looking elsewhere for their recreation and leisure needs. Recreation therapists. So we talk about recreation and leisure education all the time. And we then watched by 2016. So it went from 300 million to now, as of 2018, 1.5 billion.
That's the total hobby games.
Right. Total hobby games was only 300 million in 2008, 2009. Right. That is a 5-fold increase in 10 years. From 3 to 15.
It's a big number. Yes.
So back then, role-playing games were 20 million. So you say only 55 million. But that's still nearly a 3-fold increase. And keep in mind, role-playing game sales are not tracked really well.
And part of the reason I say only is only in comparison to the others.
Compared to the 1.5 billion.
Yeah, compared to hobby card and dice games at 150.
Yes. It has always been a smaller segment, but it is beautiful progress. So I just want to put that in perspective of that 10-year perspective.
Right. And we are talking numbers that are too large for most people to grasp.
Yeah. Now, since 2017, 2018, video game sales have started to go back up again as people have come out of, their income's improving, etc. So now you're seeing video game sales back on the uptick since late 2016, early 2017 started to turn around. So it bottomed out around 2016. So that was when video game sales kind of bottomed out, and now it's been improving since. It's not so much that the market improved the quality of their products or anything, but people have more spendable income. I think for video games, I think that's the number one reason video games have recovered is just financial. I don't think that's as multivariable as people would like to think it is. But the hobby industry, I think, is multivariable. I think there's a lot of things going on there. Part of it unplugging.
Their leisure has more to do with dollars than, has there's more variables than just dollars for how people choose their leisure.
Yeah, and another one is needing to unplug and have that human social interaction.
Yeah.
So, yeah, cool.
So Critical Role has caused some controversies.
No.
Yes.
Really?
These
Controversies about an internet show that's on Twitch and YouTube? Inconceivable.
I don't think you're using that word right. I don't think that means what you think it means. According to industry publication ICV2, retail sales of
internal correspondence.
Try Not to Hurt, ttrpgs.
Who did that? ICV2 did that?
Polygon did that.
I need to start emailing all the editors.
It accounted for only $55 million of the $1.5 billion category in 2017. If those estimates are true, then Critical Role has already earned more than 12% of the revenue of the entire tabletop role-playing game retail sector in a few days.
Say that again?
They have earned, since this is open, more than 12%.
Oh, right. The amount if it's 55 million, yeah, they may very well hit. If they get to 10 million, yeah, wow, yeah, that's going to be a big bump for the year.
Now, here's where the controversy of that comes in for. How much will Wizard of the Coast, publisher of Dungeons & Dragons, receive as part of this thing? The licensing for their use of their game.
How will it be what?
They're using Wizard of the Coast IP
to
make a fortune.
Oh. Well, but don't they already have a license agreement?
They have a license agreement that allows them to broadcast the show and to use their game. But the point that people were making was Wizard of the Coast is making no money off of this. And he says, don't get bent out on their behalf. Sitting on the most iconic franchise in history, tabletop role-playing game in history, one of the most since I enjoyed the biggest growth in periods.
It's only helping their business.
Right. Well, a group of streamers all by themselves are pulling down more than 12% of the revenue generated by the entire hobby. People get anxious because they're not making any money. They're not making the money that.
Yeah, but they are basically infomercials for their products.
Yeah.
So, I mean, unless their marketing people are getting dumb, unless their legal people are getting too involved,
right?
This is nothing but good for their product. This is paid for advertising, right? They don't have to pay for it. It's paid. It's a no cost advertising for them because people are buying their products and specifically saying, "I got this because we watch Critical Role." So I would. Yeah, that would be killing the goat. Now that wouldn't be the first time TSR that they killed the goose that's laying the golden egg. It wouldn't be the first time that the company's done something stupid. But here's hoping that they're not so foolish that they've learned and are wise now and realize how much it's benefiting them.
Actual play experiences like Critical Role are the biggest things happening in the tabletop industry. Now that is why the concept, not an actual franchise, mind you, just the concept of actual play experience won the coveted Diana Jones Award last year's Gen Con. The Diana Jones Award?
Yeah, the concept of actual play won an award.
Correct.
Explain that. Because that's not exactly a new thing. We've been doing it since the 90s over See You, See Me and stuff.
Right.
And streaming
winner
web
of the
applets.
2018 Diana Jones Award for Excellence in Gaming is actual play. It's a movement within hobby games in which people record and broadcast their game sessions, particular campaigns, some table role-playing games over the internet. Primary examples, list goes on for pages.
Yeah.
So the nobody actually got to take home this neat statue.
Yeah, because there's no one person.
Right.
Because we were streaming our games over ISDN and See You, See Me and Java web applets live on our website in the late 90s on Hawks Haven and stuff back around 97, 98. So, I mean, yeah, it's been around for a long time. Do we have any following? A few people. Okay, well, at least nobody's taking credit where they shouldn't, inventing the internet.
Right, no. No presidential candidates here. 2017 was actually Gen Con who won. for that award. So I'm not sure what the Diane Jones Award for Excellence is, but there's only one winner per year. And last year, the Gen Con as a facility one. Now, here's the other things.
Okay.
This is the real controversy, and so far I think these are the only people that are saying this, and it's the most stupid thing I have heard so long. Taking all aggregate, all these shows have one thing in common. They're pretty white. While women are all well represented in popular play experience, people of color are not. So there is a little bit of color in, if I'm assuming right from what I can see on the screen, it looks like there's one Hispanic. But
our show is pretty diverse.
Right, our show is very diverse. But our show is diverse because diverse people came and applied.
Right. Yeah.
This show, Critical Role, was started by friends. They already had their own cohort group.
Yeah.
And now that they're successful, people are saying that, oh, now you should diversify your cast.
Artificially.
Who are you going to fire?
Right, yeah. Who you get rid of.
I'm sorry, you're too white to be on this show.
Yeah.
Should we start with Matt Mercer?
Yeah. Let's be careful about this, but yeah, yeah, that's where people kind of lose sight of how things naturally progress. These were a group of friends.
Yeah. They're a group of friends.
And they decided to do this together. And it just so happened that was, their cohort. It was their cohort.
Yeah. And 90% of their success is
part of that chemistry from their friendship.
Right. It's the cast.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
Right.
Well, it's like when I was on the Spartan show and such, it was the energy that Michael and the other two guys, well, three guys, the four of us had that were getting us front page on Twitch. It was the chemistry that was there.
Right.
We don't have that chemistry with this group. The Mr. Heroes, the Mist thing at all, unfortunately. It's one of the most timid groups I've ever run. But it is a beautiful example of your average tabletop game, which was the purpose of it. That's part of the reason why they were picked, is because they were just good average folks that weren't too shy, but some we allowed who kind of were, because we wanted to make sure that, they're all there. But that is different than a group of friends. So, because we're in Spokane,
right,
the ethnic diversity here is not great. It is great for Slavic, French Canadian, and East Asian, right? So Japan, China, Vietnam, Korea, there's a lot here from Eastern Asia and Slavic, variety of Slavic cultures. And French Canadian is the largest, according to the demographics, is the largest ethnic group here in the Spokane area.
It used to be Russia.
Well,
Slavic,
USSR.
Yeah.
But Serbian and Croatian, but a lot of Russian, etc. I just say Slavic because it's all the Slavic languages and such, So we've got a little bit of Hispanic here, the whole Hispanic, Latino, Latina, and smidgen of Black, African American. It changes the demographic listing, but you get the idea. And so representatively, you're going to statistically have what you're going to have, right? You're going to have a predominantly white, though still ethnically diverse group. Just not necessarily obvious color. For example, your ethnicity.
I am a super mutt, but I have a large proportion of Hispanic, specifically Venezuelan, Indian, and Cuban.
Right. But everybody would look at you and say...
count Spain, because I am stealing Spanish, but...
Right. But everybody would look at you and say you're white.
Yeah.
Even though you have a lot of color ethnicity in your makeup and such. My friend Phil in Oklahoma, he is Native American. It wasn't for the military, they'd still be living in a trailer park and everything on the reservation. Right. The military completely changed his life, and he's a master Oracle DBA and doing quite well. But if you met him, it would be really hard to know that he was that he was Native American. So that's judging by appearances, and we have to be really careful, where people go with that. Anyway, so that's unfortunate that they're demanding a cast change from a group of friends. Now, with the current climate, I'm not saying I'm super stoked that this is the way things are going. if they were to audition a whole new cast, let's say they want to make a whole other separate show.
Right, but it wouldn't be Critical Role.
Well, it's Critical Role 2, let's say.
Okay.
Matt Mercer's still the DM, but he has a second group. So, for example, Spartan Show did 2 groups, and we've talked about how disastrous that was. But let's say he decides to create a second group because of all this demand, and it is an open cattle call, right? That in acting parlance, that's not a racial derogatory statement, by the way. Don't anybody mistake that. That is actor parlance for everybody. Come on in and audition, right? And you'll have a description of what you're looking for, age range, appearance, whatever. And often appearance is very much specified, and other times it's not. It depends on what the role is for. But you may have to say 16 to 18 years old, female, a certain body build, certain complexion. These things are specified by the directors and such for what they're looking for in their movie or their play.
And one of the problems with those specifications is if they don't specify, is something like.
Well, that's going to depend on where you are. If you did it in Africa,
right?
You're doing a cattle call in, Central Africa or something, then there's going to be a different assumption.
But in Hollywood,
it's going to depend on where you are.
And this,
yes, in Hollywood.
Unfortunately, this is just an assumption,
right?
Because that means that somebody who could have applied doesn't.
Yeah. Basically, when you're an actor, you look for those specifications, and if it doesn't say an ethnicity, then you go apply. You go audition.
Yeah.
You audition. But often it will say Caucasian, Hispanic, African American, whatever. It will say we are looking for because they have a specific look in mind. So in their case, they would leave it unspecified and just say a minimum age range or something, and pretty much have to leave it at that, and then say what they're looking for, experience with gaming or something like that, and they can be quizzed for that, and that's how you would do that cattle call. So the safest way to do that, do a cattle call, don't specify gender, don't specify ethnicity, only specify, must be 18 or older, if that's what they're doing, unless it's a kids group, and must have experience with tabletop gaming or something or not, if they want to do an introduction. Like I did with Spartan Show, they had never done tabletop role-playing before, and I trained them in that from the beginning. So, so that would be the only real way, and the Hollywood area is ethnically diverse.
Right.
It is very ethnically diverse. Southern California, if you are Caucasian, you are a minority by a lot. I grew up in California, and I was often the only white guy in sight when I was in Oakland and Richmond and stuff like that. I was the only white kid around for as far as you could see. So that would be one way they could address that, but they shouldn't kill the existing group. It's like, if you really want to do it because you want to show a broader representation, you would need to create another group to not kill the current group.
There are other groups out there. It's not Matt Mercer's fault that his is popular.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
okay. And there's no guarantee it'll succeed. There's no guarantee of the chemistry. So, for example, when the Spartan Show did 2 groups, the primary group was doing better than the secondary group. Both groups came from established Twitch personalities, and did their darndest to try to get the traction that the first group had. Well, part of it was we had the primary group with the Friday slot, which had more viewers than the Tuesday slot. So there's a lot of variables that go into it. Anyway, yeah, so that is concerning. I think it's people who really aren't paying attention and don't really understand the dynamics of things. It's a knee-jerk reaction of, hey. There's I'm not endorsing this in any way, shape, or form, but there's a book out now about the culture of outrage.
Yeah.
And it has a database of over 500 supposed ethnic beatings and such that turned out to be completely made up just in the past few years.
Well, we have a huge one.
So this is a dangerous topic. I'm afraid to even go down. So anyway, so it sounds like there's some people who are outraged. That's unfortunate. I hope they won't do a boycott or any of the other public shaming things that happen of the show. Instead, how about this? How about they put together an episode like Tanya? Tanya's all about diversity. I forget her, but she's all about diversity in gaming, right? We were on the panel of PAX Unplugged this fall. She's all about more diverse gaming. Great. Tanya and others put the groups together, which is exactly what she's doing.
And I've seen the advertisements from a lot of...
And without segregation, right? Just make it more diverse and get more groups out there. And we'll have lots of... The beautiful thing about the internet with YouTube and such is, and as long... Well, it's getting problematic, but YouTube and Twitch and such, when it's left alone, it's all meritocracy of what people like is what they will watch.
Right.
Now, when the companies start to get involved and start to shadow ban and...
Logarithms?
Yeah, they do the algorithms that reduce people being able to find stuff. That's when things become problematic. But if they leave it alone and just let things spread naturally, then you let the shows spread naturally. And that's great. That's great because the world with the internet, it's the world, is much more diverse than our tiny little 340 million whatever slice of the population here in the United States.
Right.
So, yeah. Well, I just hope that this just spurs many more groups, many more successful groups, that we do see more diversity. I've run a number of streams that my groups are usually ethnically diverse. And it just happens that way. I don't try to do it. And I've just been fortunate that people have felt comfortable enough coming in because I am a middle-aged white guy and tall, so some people are intimidated by that. And fortunately, people haven't felt threatened and have joined my groups and such.
Kind of like my groups and women, I get a larger than average percentage of the female gamers at my tables.
Well, maybe, yeah.
It's not because I'm handsome.
Yeah.
But
I've watched this. There's also other factors. So prior to Bothered About Dungeons & Dragons and the Satanic Moral Panic of the 80s, which ramped up in the mid-80s and peaked in the late 80s, early 90s.
Who wants to be associated with
my gaming groups were pretty much generally about half and half male and female. And I hear all the time people, it was all male, it's all male. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. My gaming groups were half and half, and it wasn't any overt effort.
No.
I sometimes had groups that were all male. I sometimes had groups that were predominantly female, except for me. But on average, it was a little bit one way or the other, 1/3, 2/3, something like that, but it fluctuated. And I was in Utah and California, and California was obviously more diverse, was better than the local area representation because gamers are so welcoming and inclusive. So in Utah, when I was in Utah, which was we've had a problem with the whole outrage culture thing. That's a whole other story.
And the gatekeepers.
Yes, and gatekeeping goes both ways.
Yep. It does.
Yeah, but when I was in Utah, which is very predominantly white, I also had ethnically diverse gamers in my group, much more than statistically you would expect in the Salt Lake area, because it's such an open, welcoming environment. Now, are there people who are bigoted in many ways? Of course there are, and in gaming too, because it's all human beings. But overall, the gamer community is pretty darn open and inclusive. I don't think there are many communities as open and inclusive as the gaming community is. Now, I think that's actually starting to change more the other way as people, as the outrage culture stuff is starting to dominate, and I think that's actually scaring some people away, unfortunately. And it again, a lot of it is perception rather than reality.
Right.
There's only a very small number of people who have had these incidents and outrage and such, but when you get enough press attention, it looks bigger than it is. People start to say, I don't want to get in the middle of that. And I have started to run into people recently like, I don't want to go around any geek culture stuff because they're all SJWs or stuff like that. And
right.
I'm like, well, there's some. I mean, they're around, but that isn't my experience. But there's a lot of press coverage.
Part of the outrage coverage is I blame the media because it's the
just like Bad and the whole Satanic Moral Panic of the 80s.
Yeah, exactly.
They distorted the reality.
If
severely.
It leads, and bad stuff's more exciting than the good stuff. So why focus on that?
All right, what else
New
we
topic. Where's Our Theme Park? By Alan.
There's a quasi one in Utah.
Hasbro recently announced a licensing agreement with Image Resorts and Hotels LLC to develop the first ever Hasbro-themed indoor water park and family resort. They announced following a license agreement with Kilburn Live to create, build, and operate Hasbro-themed family entertainment centers across the U.S. and Canada. Despite reference to Hasbro's brandings ranging from My Little Pony to Magic the Gathering, Dungeons & Dragons wasn't mentioned. Why not?
Well, there's not enough money for it.
Well, we were promised a D&D amusement park when the D&D cartoon came out. Come on.
Yeah, well, Gygax spent too much of that on cocaine and strippers. And that got himself fired.
There is the Evermore Park in Utah, which we've looked at.
We've talked about that a number of times.
Of course, people want to mention that Wizardry World of Harry Potter is really close to having a D&D theme park, especially since that one is practically a hybrid role-playing game.
Well, the Evermore one, too, there's a little bit. It's a quasi kind of dinner theater, walk-through theater thing, but you don't take on the role yourself as much, so it's more of a dinner theater amusement park, kind of like Medieval Times, but a walk-through rather than sit down. You familiar with Medieval Times?
Oh, yes, I've been there.
No, we went to the Dallas one.
Vegas.
Okay.
Making Kessel Run less than 12 parsecs. Galaxy Edge, a Star Wars themed land coming.
Where's Charles?
I don't know, but he would love this.
Yes.
In fact, that
you need to tell him.
The Kessel Run Galaxy Edge Star Wars themed land coming Disneyland Park in Anaheim, California, Disney World Hollywood Studios in Orlando, Florida. Star attractions Flying the Millennium Falcon, in which 6 visitors pilot the ship.
Nice.
It's not like Star Tours. The difference is that, while both are simulators, do you remember at the convention we were at, RadCon, they had that Starship Simulator. Everybody took a position. Your weapons, your pilots, your science. You're doing that on the Millennium Falcon. Right. All 6 of you have positions, and you can...
Now, is it just computer, or is it moving like the simulator down here at the Spokane World Fair?
Yeah.
Have you been to that simulator down there?
Yeah.
The flight simulator?
I haven't been to this one, but I have been to another one.
This is 1974. You've never been to it?
There are people in New York who've never been to the Statue of Liberty.
It's funny. Locals very rarely go to the local things that, like skiing. A lot of people who ski in Utah, with some best snow on earth, where it's really good skiing, are not from Utah. Most people I would meet on the lift and stuff were not from Utah. I'm not from Utah, so that probably contributed. And I'm not from Spokane. So I go to all the local tourist things. But you're mostly local. You're Idaho, Spokane area. And so you've never been in that simulator.
Never been.
Do you get motion sickness?
No, my wife does.
Okay.
Once we stop doing roller coasters.
You don't want Carolyn on it.
Yeah.
It will make you motion sick. But it does. It does a simulated roller coaster and water slide, and it's jumping all around. And it's from 1974.
Yeah, that's exactly what they're going to do. It's going to be a full-on simulator. 2 people sit in the front, act as pilot, 2 gunners, and 2 engineers. You push buttons and use controls like in a real ship. Your actions will impact what happens during the ride. You are playing a live-action video game.
Cool.
And you can fail.
Cool.
Building game park.
End of line.
Magic Gathering is there. So, there are people that have been trying to build D&D based theme parks. There's one that was trying to do one for his son.
Supply and demand. You can't, if you just make it and there's not enough demand, because theme parks are expensive. And you can get the initial spike of interest, but if it's not sustainable, it'll just be another ghost town. Like a certain adventure we know.
Yes, we just finished.
Yeah.
Arrow down.
Doctor Who adventure, yeah.
So, I have here, from Drive-Thru RPG, Wizards, Warriors, and Wellness. Mm-hmm. It's only available as a PDF.
This is from the Badana Group.
Correct.
Jack Birkenstock and Company.
Suggested price is $10, but it is pay what you want.
Yeah. I did buy a copy of it to support them.
I put in $10.
Yep, I did too.
I've been reading it. The first third of it is, or at least the first 14 out of 38 pages, is it's simplified. Mm-hmm. It's explaining to people what role-playing games are, what their benefits are, social skills, creativity, empathy, critical thinking, problem-solving, resilience, education, initiative, fun, conflict resolution. Then that's just up to page 9. 10.
How many pages?
38.
Oh, it's really short.
Yeah, I almost... This is an overview.
$10
this is
for 40. Ooh, I didn't pay attention to that. Okay. That's a little steep for 38 pages.
It's a charity donation, basically.
Is it? Are they donating it to their nonprofit? I didn't really... it was Jack, so I was trying to support him and such. I didn't really read the
It's going to the Badana Group, which is a 501c3 nonprofit.
Yeah, and they They are a bunch of therapists who work with people with trauma, PTSD, and sexual trauma, and sexual offenders to try to help them, improve their lives and such using games. Not just role-playing games, all kinds of games. And then they do the annual convention fundraiser, Save Against Fear, is their convention thing, and they're very active.
There's a couple pictures of Save Against Fear in here.
Yeah, they're great folks. So if you get a chance to support them, swing on by and check that out.
The 1/3 that I haven't read yet, which is the most part, because choose a game, build a character, and all that other stuff. All the top stuff is preaching the prior stuff. Possible application for specific diagnostic conditions starts on page 16 with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, anger issues, anxiety, autism spectrum disorder, depression, learning disabilities, social skills defects, trauma information, and things to remember. And of course, the thing that everybody has to know when you're looking at this is not a guide for you to become a therapist.
Yeah, it's just an introduction to some of the considerations.
It's a great tool for somebody who is a therapist to say, hey, this is something to look at.
As a starting point.
But it is not meant as your book.
Right, so the RPG Professional's Handbook, which even that is actually still introductory, but it is for professionals to start them on the path. It doesn't provide the programs. That's a separate book.
Right.
So we have a separate book for recreation RPG professionals. We have a separate book for entertainment RPG professionals. People like
Matt Mercer.
Yeah, well, not Matt Mercer, but shows like that, the streaming shows and such. A separate book for RPG professionals in educational settings and trying to teach through gamification and such. And then a separate book for therapeutic role-playing gaming for therapists.
Right.
So each one is geared. So the RPG Professional's Handbook is trying to talk to all four professionals as, here's what you need to get started. Here's the insurance considerations and the liability issues, and make sure you get your licensing from the game companies if you're going to use their products, or it's going to come back to bite you. A lot of people don't take that into account, and they have gag orders and can't tell you how many people have been bitten and have had to pay hefty settlements because they didn't ask permission first. That's why we don't use Green Ronin and
orders
stuff.
Are nasty. The penalties are worse than
you can't say anything.
Crime.
You can't say anything. So people don't realize just how important it is that you get that. So and then it isn't how to run your business, but it is if you're a role playing gamer and you want to be professional about it, and here's the branch you're going into. Here's the starting checklist of all the things you need to know. And it will touch on theory and a few assessment tools and things like that and give you a starting point. But then you're supposed to then pick which pathway you're going down and then get the separate book for that, because that goes into a lot more detail of the tools that you need. But it is a starting point. More than that's a very cursory. That would be, so 40 pages, that would be the first couple of chapters. This book's 300 pages.
Yeah. This is I know it's a book by technical definition, but it feels to me like a pamphlet.
Right. It's a long introductory pamphlet in a way, yeah. But I'm glad he's doing it, and every bit that we can do, so help spread the word. And there you go, Jack. We're helping spread the word to our huge audience.
So, if you're watching, wake up, you're on the wrong channel. No, just kidding. Impressive Dungeons & Dragons Anthology has just come out. It's called Uncaged. First volume of Uncaged. A dozen creators, including Ashley Warren. New anthology series focuses on female monsters from Dungeons & Dragons and tries to put them in a different light. Different viewpoints. For example, what if the Gorgon was the hero? The common thing of Medusa is that she was a villainous monster that she tried to do.
Rather than cursed or something.
The reality...
You could do more of a Sleeping Beauty type curse or something instead if you wanted.
So they have one on Medusa where she's actually more of the heroine. First volume Cage contains a variety of encounters and short adventures with interesting characters, also subvert popular tropes about female monsters. There's a hag motivated not out of malice, but rather revenge for her murdered sisters, or the Dryad who is seemingly destroying her own forest and threatening nearby village, but sparing nearby wildlife. They take the myths cultural myths and folklore like Little Mermaid, Madame Whitesnake, or La Llorona. Many of these stories carry deeper meanings, adventures about generational divides, cultural sexism, and overcoming prejudice and traditional views, both in the world of D&D and around the gaming table. These are the things that people are saying aren't being represented, and the answer to the complaints about not being representative is to do it.
Great. If it's your area of expertise, go for it. There's lots of things there I just don't know, so I can't do it. I worked in the publishing industry on and off for a lot of years through the 90s and early 2000s, mostly from the technical side. Franklin Covey, Franklin Day Planners, Stephen R. Covey, 7 Habits. Franklin Covey and Franklin Day Planners merged, and I worked at Franklin Covey. And a big part of it was publishing and such. Then Mighty Words, we were Fat Brain and Barnes & Noble and Amazon and Microsoft Books and IBM Red Books, etc. I was CTO there. And one of the things that was the pitch about why Mighty Words, which was a whole ebook company back in the late 90s, early 2000s, is the way the publishing industry has worked for hundreds of years.
Right.
It's very dated. And very resistant to change, right? They have fought tooth and nail against ebooks, etc. Now they're kind of embracing it, but we're kind of set back to the late 80s, early 90s with the way things are, sort of. I'm slipping on my point. I told you I'm not feeling very well today. Sorry. Summarize that again, because it just fell out of my head.
If people want these books with different point of views, different
different content and
stuff, write it yourself.
Right. So it was about expertise. That was the topic I was trying to get to. So Mighty Words was trying to make it because so you have in the publishing industry, you have news articles, magazine articles, journals, and then books.
Right.
And so news articles are typically a few columns to maybe a page or two, right? A magazine article might be a few pages. A really good one might give you upwards of 5 or 10 pages, right? A really special expose.
Right.
Or certain journals. And then, scientific and academic journals might give you 50 pages or 100 pages. That's a different story. That's in academia. There's usually a huge paywall for that. That's a different story. But for mainstream publishing and such, 1 to 10 pages is about it for news and magazines and such.
50 pages on an article is a book that was put in a magazine cover.
Yeah, well, you don't see that in a magazine or newspaper or anything like that. You might see that in certain types of journals, but 1 to 10 pages. Then you jump up to typically around 100, 150 pages minimum to be a book. We're not talking little kids' books and such, but generally all the books that are out
chapter
there.
Books.
And that's 150 pages minimum. So the way it would work, let's say you're an author, and we're going to talk technical stuff here because that was where it evolved from, was through Fat Brain and such. Fat Brain was the number 3 online bookseller back in the 90s. So you had Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Fat Brain. And Mighty Words was a spinoff from Fat Brain. We were the ebooks division of Fat Brain. And so let's say you're a technical person, whether you're a doctor, computer tech, doesn't matter. You have researched and know this topic really well. And you've written a 50-page piece that is knowledgeable, well-researched, accurate, right, from your perspective and such. Really good, timely content, right? It's relevant now. And you go to a publisher and you want to get it. It's way too big to ever be in a magazine or anything. You'll never get into there. But it's only 50 pages. But you won't make
any money there anyways.
Yeah, it's only 50 pages. So you go to a publishing company and they go, oh, you know what? This is great. Yeah, there's a market demand for this. We need to get this out of the market as soon as we can. But it's too small because the spine won't show up on the bookshelf.
Right.
We need you to fluff it up a little. So let's say it's tech books. So you have these tech books that are all like 600 pages with a spine like that, and they're all about $50 to $70 each. There's a reason for that has become an industry standard. You'll have somebody who's like an information security specialist, which is something I work on. And they'll write a book that's 50 pages on this information that they really know really well. Go to a publisher and that's great, but would you also cover all these protocols? Like, turn it into a whole thing on information security. We will give you an editor, and we will give you some subject matter experts to help you fluff it out to 300 to 500 pages. and it'll take about 18 months to do this. So that'll be a year and a half later.
Not so timely anymore.
You were ready to publish then. It'll be a year and a half later. So you go through this process. Now you're being pushed outside of your area of knowledge and expertise, more likely to have mistakes. And these experts that you bring in, has been at least under pressure, that you bring in, aren't necessarily anywhere near as knowledgeable about the subject material as you are about the subject material that you knew, but they know more about this other area. Anyway, so you end up with a book that has a whole bunch of meh content and 50 pages of good content scattered throughout.
Right.
And then you go, man, I expect a lot more from this person who is, XYZ notable person. That is how the publishing industry was working in the 90s, early 2000s, and has been slowly transitioning thanks to ebooks, but they are fighting it tooth and nail. And you still run into that a lot. Now, the good thing about ebooks is you don't care about spine size, and so you can do a 38-page ebook and stuff, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't cost the publisher anymore for that. The ingest system for Amazon's publishing system, that'll go faster than a 200-page book. To put it in perspective, we had like 150,000 content items in Mighty Words, and we only put 200 of our content items through Amazon's ebooks at the time, and the top 50 selling ebooks and most popular ebooks during that whole time were all ours.
Okay.
So we had good content. But it was, with the ebooks, that gives you the new flexibility. So the good thing is, as that's become more ubiquitous, it opens up this content. But the point I was trying to make is about expertise versus outside of expertise. So let's say I write a book about role-playing gaming from my perspective as a paid professional, as a recreational therapist. Let's say.
Right. Just assume. I know it's a stretch.
Just pretend.
Try to think of it that way.
So I am not going to write about role-playing gaming from the African-American perspective. I am not going to write about it from the Latina perspective. That is well outside of my realm of experience, expertise, and knowledge. Now, if I had a degree and focused on Latin Latina studies and such, and even if I'm, Caucasian and everything, then maybe I would have a subject matter expert and such, but I could still be accused of you're not really of that, you're out-group instead of in-group and whatever. Yeah. That's a whole other story. But I'm not going to write about that, and I'm not going to make content targeting that because that's outside of my area of expertise. I'm going to write and provide content that I think is going to be useful and helpful to people from my perspective. And then hopefully others. So the way the RPG Professionals Handbook is formed, it's kind of a really big RFC, request for comments. I'm putting it out there. It's going to be controversial. There's going to be things people disagree with. And I'm hoping people will submit additional content so that version 2 will be much more diverse input than myself and those of us who have been doing it. And so that there'll be, I'm creating a baseline structure with it. And then hopefully those will go, that's great, but I disagree with this, but here's my experience. So if you are of Hispanic descent and a gamer and your experiences, and you've learned how to really make role-playing gaming connect with your group more, let's have a chapter on that from your perspective.
I want to have one of our talk show days, less news and a little more talk about something like cultural appropriation in role-playing games. Is it okay for you to play Oriental Adventures?
Absolutely okay.
Yeah.
Role-playing. R-O-L-E, playing.
Preaching to the choir here?
Yes.
I'm just saying
I know.
That's a whole
I know. That's
topic.
It's a sore subject for a lot of people, unfortunately. Yeah. And are there terrible tropes and stereotypes and all kinds of... Yes, there's all kinds of issues. We know that. However, it can still be a wonderful starting place for expanding one's horizons that they would not otherwise have done. So, as many issues as there are with the old first edition Oriental Adventures and such, it is a great starting point, if done appropriately and with consideration, to exposing people to very different cultural concepts, a la feudal Japan, for example, Tokugawa era 1600, like I'm doing the whole research study with EWU piece on 1600 Tokugawa era, trying to use that to teach that whole time period of transition, using Oriental Adventures. Is it super accurate? No. Let's see. Okay, so we got some comments finally. Woohoo!
Wow.
Ricky Cat, experts, yes. Has been leaks under pressure is how I do it. Extra Life Jen, wouldn't that mean that you need to collab with someone who is that diverse person? That's what I hope will happen, when the book is... I'm not writing from that perspective because I don't have that. That's not my expertise. I'm going to write from the areas of knowledge that I have, put it all there, and then, there's lots of room for other people for the second edition to add more content to it. It's a baseline beginning scaffolding.
Yeah, there are two ways that people go about diversifying the voice of what they're putting out there. One method is I'm going to go out and I'm going to find people. Hey, are you Latin, female, and gay? Okay, hit the check boxes. I need you to write about this topic.
Well, and feel free, go ahead and write some, and it'll still have to go through editorial and all that, but the submissions are
other method is what you're doing. Here's the stuff. If you are inclined to present to me, I will accept your stuff. I'm not going to hunt you down and say, do you meet these check boxes before we talk about whether or not you can write for us?
I'm not going to, exactly. You feel free, it's request for comments. Yeah. Send your comments, and if it's done in a professional manner, we'll gladly add it to, because that's what I want to have. I have put these RFCs out there for 15 years, and I've gotten some feedback here and there as I put these all out. Everything that's in these books, I've already released for free. Right. On RPG Research at some point in some piece. It's just some people I've been specifically requested by some professors, some teachers, and other professionals that since it's all over the websites, could you put it in a book format, please? So that's another book of all the content. That's yet another book.
I have had somebody say that they were having trouble finding research on role-playing games and PTSD through the RPG Research website.
Right, because we're transitioning from the old to the new, and people don't know how to navigate the old one. And we have the darn paywall problem, right? We have a ton of research that we can't share. We can't even put the abstract because some of the journals say you can't publish a copy of our abstract. You can only publish the citation, and that's it. So you don't find anything other than the title and the people.
You'd think they would want the abstract so that people would go, hey, I want
but
to
some journals, a lot of journals are really restrictive that way. They want you to stay in their database and their paywall.
Right.
So what we're doing to get around that is we're having our researchers are writing entire reviews of that particular research so that it's an original writing, citing all of their information, and now you've got all that content. It's a workaround around the copyright thing without violating copyright. And so it takes forever to do this, but that's part of it.
Volunteers, please.
Yeah, we need more and more. Keep bringing. We got 55, and let's keep counting. Rickety Cat, how many orcs and halflings play tabletops? It's probably cultural appropriation.
Yeah, we had a thing about where...
and then probably not.
Coding. Halflings are this culture, and...
Oh, boy.
Orcs are that culture. Yeah. No, orcs are their own culture.
Yeah, there are people who do that. There are people who do that, but that's not how it evolved. And again, that's that context thing, right? They're talking about Critical Role. They don't understand the context of how it evolved. Extra Life Jen says, Rickety Cat, I am a beholder. So, so these are, I'm always nervous about going down these roads because it is... With the outrage culture that's been growing and such, it can be very, very tricky to not set people off and try to have a nice discourse about this. So try to be as careful about it, but they still need to be discussed at least that we can't pretend they're not there.
Right.
So anyway.
It's caused more harm than
good. The key thing is through the internet, through openness, and getting stuff out there. If you see something lacking, the beautiful thing of the internet is you can put the stuff out there, and if it's good enough quality or captures people's hearts and minds and such, then it can grow, and that's been the beautiful thing of it. Look at Tanya's following. She has a huge following on Twitter, right? And she's all about the diversity and everything. So that's great. More power to all of that. That's the beauty of the internet platform, which I've been on since '79. So when it was DARPA ARPANET, it has become a much rougher place.
Just like my marriage, the World Wide Web is 30 years old this year.
Okay, somebody's
spamming us?
Well, no, somebody made a comment that, and I'm not sure what the context is. I'm going to have to deny it because it goes. So we're a family-friendly stream here, and it uses language that the Twitch stream has caught. So if you can, so people got to, we got to keep it family-friendly.
Restate in PG-13 terminology.
And without being hostile or, And
no, you don't get the one F word. It doesn't work that way. So PG.
Yeah.
Just PG.
So anyway, what did we got to get a few of the.
I have one last one.
Great.
Hopefully it's booted up to the right spot.
For joy. It will also appeal to any fans of strategic card games. An interesting side note for
Perfect, it is. So, Stratego Battle Cards from Patch Products. Stratego Battle Cards is based on the original Stratego board game, which is a capture the flag hidden identity game. From the 80s? Maybe even a little earlier.
Yeah, Stratego, yeah.
For history fans, the original Stratego was developed during World War II, though it too has roots in other classic games. And its point values and changing fortunes made it one of the original role-playing games and a precursor to contemporary hits like Dungeons & Dragons and Magic the Gathering.
Okay, for those who are visually impaired audience members, or if you're listening on the podcast, I'm going, what?
Yes.
What? One of the first role-playing games? Are you kidding me? This is a big pet peeve of mine. When everybody tries to just lump everything under one huge category, because they're just apparently completely ignorant about what a role-playing game is, and that is part of what's happened. Is this has grown and grown and grown and grown.
I'm in the role of Meeple number 3.
Just because it has statistics does not make it a role-playing game. You're not taking on a role to play through.
And it can be even argued that it's not even a war game.
Yeah, but
It's war themed, but it's not a war game.
But that's like, so if they're saying because there's characters in here that have different stats and such, yeah, that makes every war game a role-playing game, and they're not. They're clearly not. Here is in our RPG.education courses. I have a longer list elsewhere, but the very basics of, and now of course the page has disappeared on me. Where'd it go? The very basics of a role-playing game. Browser crash on me. That's not good. I had this page pulled up.
Come on, man. I got all my keys up.
I know. It went away. I had it, and I think it barfed. Lovely. The basics of role-playing game components. Let me go ahead and I'll pull up the class again. I have to log in and such. So this is an RPG.education. We have our online courses. This is an introduction to role-playing games, and because this laptop's running really slow for some reason. It's beefy, but my connection's choking. And went through the basics, and part of it is just parsing the word role, R-O-L-E,
right?
Playing game. So all three of those must be in it to be an RPG. If you don't have those three components, and then I define it, and of course my connection's not loading, then how is it an RPG? It's not if you can't fit all three of those. Now, what a role is where people get kind of sketchy and go a little too broad in the terminology.
I'm an actor. I'm role-playing.
Well, like, then people are saying, like, Monopoly. Like, because you're a property owner, and
I'm a little dog.
And this is why, if you check out rpgmodel.com, why I've been, since 2004, working on an RPG model, and there's a lot of others out there. This isn't the only one. It's for discussion, trying to figure out what exactly is. So there's the original tabletop role-playing game. Then you've got the live-action variants. You have the solo adventure books and modules, and you have the electronic versions.
And the hybrids.
And then everything else is pretty much the hybrids. And the hybrids are a mixture of two or more of the four core formats, or one or more of the core formats plus something else outside of role-playing games, card games, board games, what have you. And why don't you connect?
So that Star Wars ride is a LARP video game. It's obviously a hybrid.
Yeah. It's not, and even LARP versus LRPG is something I'm trying to figure out, because LARP is so broad into salon games and dinner, movie, murder, mystery theater adventures, and that's what I'm
trying
working
to get those episodes.
So one of the best resources for live action role playing is Professor Sarah Lynn Bowman out of Texas. She's a great resource. Who's
mentioned a lot in
when it comes to LARP, she is highly recognized. The Functions Role Playing Game book is a great resource, and highly recommend her. She's great. She's not doing a lot of research lately. She said she's kind of gotten out of the research thing for now, juggling other stuff. But okay, let me get back into the course here now that my laptop's kind of working again, because I wanted to go down. I've got the top 10 that are kind of required to be a role-playing game. There's more. There's way more. You've seen my huge list. But this is just kind of like, if you don't have these 10, you can't call it a role-playing game. And it's all 10. You got to have all 10 of these, or it's not a role-playing game. And then we can get into more specifics. And I'm trying to pick the less controversial, because others get more and more controversial. And even some of these people debate whether that's really, and that's okay. That's all part of discourse and discussion. Man, this connection is not being cooperative.
Will that be part of the class tonight?
That's up to you, because you're running it.
Well, I mean, if it was part of the original presentation of the different types, then we would obviously get into the part of...
It isn't in the slideshow.
Got it.
The pros and cons are in the slideshow.
Right.
All the different pros and cons of the different formats are in the slideshow, and that should hopefully give you a lot of time. That's why I was trying to get this ready for you for tonight. I just don't think I'm going to have it ready in time. Okay, overview RPGs, RPG 99. Okay, got editing on. All right, here we go. RPG formats. So a few key definitions we're running over here, but this should hopefully help you with what you're teaching tonight. Role-playing game, there's a player character, there's a game master, or some sort of
referee.
Thing that acts as a game master. It might be the book, it might be the computer program, it might be the cassette player, but there's something that acts as an invisible control of your world there. There's an author and designer, there's narrator, director, actor. These are all the roles of kind of a GM. Author, designer, narrator, director, actor, referee, manager, facilitator. Then there's non-player characters. Then there's RPG systems, there's genres, there's settings, there's adventure and adventure modules, campaigns, the adventure party, the game session. These are all kind of components of the activity.
Right.
These are not what are required to be a role-playing game, but these are part of the activity. So those are important things to keep in mind. So key components of it to be defined as a role-playing game. Come on, load, please. Live broadcasting. Oh, it is not going to work in my favor here, is it? Connection go down again. I'm getting 33-second ping time now. I think my latest update broke my network drivers.
I have a Dell update here screaming at me to install, and it scares me.
Yeah, I'd wait till after your thing tonight. I keep having to reset my network connection. I think the last update I did on my video driver kernel, I think, hosed my networking driver. Thank you. And this is Linux, which normally stays clean and steady, but it's just being one of those weeks with technology. I want to wrap up, but I want to make this point about these 10 things, and it's really fighting me. So we already talked about the four formats, the four core formats, which are Tabletop RPG, the original, SABM, Solo Adventure Books and Modules, live action role-playing games, so LRPGs and LARPs, electronic role-playing games, computer role-playing games are a subset of that, and hybrid role-playing games, and then pros and cons of each. All right, 10 RPG core components. So these are pretty much required, or it's not a role-playing game. Number 1, player defines and assumes a persona other than themselves as the character. Now, it could be a mirror of themselves, it could be a representation of themselves, but it is other than them. It isn't them. There has to be a role that is taken on that is a separate role from themselves.
Right.
So if I'm your boss and I'm playing boss,
dies, you don't.
Yeah, but so let's say I'm team captain, and I'm well, using sports analogies is dangerous for me. But let's say I'm the quarterback,
right?
And I'm playing a quarterback. I'm not playing a role other than myself. I am the quarterback for the team because it's a game, right? Football is a game, so that's not a role-playing game if I'm playing a quarterback because I'm a quarterback. I have a role assigned. But it's my role. It's not an entity unto itself.
Yeah. There's not that separation between you and...
Now, if I'm playing a role-playing game where I'm an average Joe and I'm playing the role of a quarterback in the game, that's a role.
Even if you are a professional football player...
Even if you're a professional football player, even if you're a quarterback for another team, in the game sense, that role is separate from yourself. Yes. So it is a required part of the ROLE component of RPG, role. 2. The players control the character's actions, including decision-making, a required part of the ROLE and the playing component, right? You got to be controlling some action activities. A structured rules system that determines success or failure at attempted actions, required part of the game component. This is where LARP gets a little bit of trouble sometimes. Because, and I don't mean trouble, but LARP can bleed really easily, and I don't mean that kind of thing, can overlap with improv theater.
Right.
And when it becomes pure improv theater and really the only rule is yes, but, and then behavioral code of conduct stuff, and you don't have a defined character other than the improv, that's not LARP.
No.
That's improvisational theater. Right? And that can be drama therapy and all sorts of great things. I'm not knocking in any way, shape, or form, but we have to set some distinction here as to what a role-playing game is. And that goes away. It goes outside of the pure game, role-playing game, because you don't have the structured rules and such. And a clearly defined character. Actions are representational, simulated, or actual, so that varies between the format. It's required for the game and play components. If you don't have actions, then it's internal meditation or something, right?
Yeah.
Abaddon interaction patterns and such. It's not a game and it's not play. Character is able to succeed at tasks beyond the capabilities of the player. Now that varies considerably between formats. But to truly be a role-playing game, there must be the possibility that a PC can do something better or worse than the actual player. Now with LARP, especially buffers and such, that gets tricky, but they usually have modifiers if it's an actual LARP, not a reenactment.
True, they'll have modifiers such as your weapon will do
2 damage instead of 1.
And your shield contains...
Your character has a strength modifier that adds to it, something like that. It's not just equipment. It has to be something to do with your character, not just the equipment. If it's just equipment, that's more simulated combat. Something with your character and the definition of your character, which we'll talk about here in a second. And I could do a better order of this, but it's the way it is right now. Measurable character aspects, statistical information such as traits, attributes, advancement, etc. We'll get to advancement in a minute. Required for the game component. Otherwise, it's not a game, right? If you don't have some sort of game rules and statistical thing for it's all part of the game component of an RPG. There are the games that don't have the same statistical stuff, but for role-playing games, that's part of what makes it a role-playing game. That's where SABM gets a little fuzzy, and some LARPs. Mm-hmm. The character has a means to develop and evolve over time and not remain static. Critical for the role and game components. And that's where a lot fall. Now, SABM, some of them do, some of them don't. And that's why we've kind of created that as there's a wide range in that area for SABM. And some are better than others. For example, the Choose Your Own Adventure, solo adventure books.
Nothing changes by your character. Physically.
In the story progression, it can. There can be things, but most of them do not. It's things and stuff like that.
Right.
And so that's why it's a solo adventure book rather than an actual full role-playing game. But there are solo adventure books and modules that have made it more of a role-playing game and put that into it. Now, we could have lumped SABM under hybrid role-playing games, and I've debated that heavily. And with enough convincing, I could see sliding that under HRPGs potentially.
I think it deserves its own category. It's distinctive enough from the other hybrids to be its own category. The problem with character growth and development, some of the classic so-called electronic role-playing games, such as Zelda. Zelda technically is not a role-playing game by this definition.
Yeah. Extra Life Jen says you can always check that with knowledge, character knowledge versus player knowledge. Yeah, there's a lot more we can cover. I'm just trying to get some core ones here, but yes. So character has a means to develop and evolve. Okay, imagination and creativity required part of the playing component. So there's some sort of imagination going on here. Because again, that's part of creating a role other than self. You're putting yourself in an imaginary situation. And important to that is suspension of disbelief, part of the play component. You've got to go, if you want to do it effectively, but you have to allow, this is a game. I'm playing this game, and I'm going to be in the game, and it's okay. I know it's not real, but I'm also going to suspend that for the moment to have this pretend reality, to be in this bubble of the role-playing game experience. Without the suspension of disbelief, the play doesn't happen the same way. It becomes something else entirely different as opposed to putting yourself in this narrative. And then, key part, some kind of narrative component linking events together in an ongoing progression that supports the PC's development, often an interactive narrative, though what is interacted with varies by format.
Right.
So that's a key thing, that's a key part of role-playing games, is some sort of connected narrative. Now, it can be pretty minimal. Right, dungeon crawls have pretty minimal narratives connecting the story.
The narrative is room, monster, fight.
But there is some sort of connected narrative. Now, again, these are not all-inclusive by any long shot, but I needed to stop at 10 because this is an introductory course. There's a lot more. But it gets trickier and trickier and trickier to figure out those parameters. I'm trying really hard to figure out where those boundaries are so that we can have some sort of agreement. What is a role-playing game? And so these are just 10 of... I've got like 90-something different components that are part of potential role-playing games, and trying to figure out, okay, what really is distinctive? What combination makes it, if I list these items, that's a tabletop role-playing game. I list these items, it's a live-action role-playing game. If I list these items, it's a computer-based role-playing game, right?
Right.
Trying to find that. And then, that's the minimum, right? Those are the minimum requirements. Any more than that can be other variations. But what is the core minimum that makes it an RPG? And of course, the first template is to look at the first role-playing game, which was Dungeons & Dragons 1974, and what came out then. And though there's been a lot of advancement in developing role-playing games, those core concepts haven't really changed. And so that's kind of what you start with, is that kernel of what was in that.
Yeah.
And then there's ways to make the game better, and, play styles have changed, etc. So... I'm not saying I know the answer. I'm putting these out here for discussion, for us trying to figure this out so that we can say definitively Stratego is not a role-playing game because XYZ.
Right.
Because there's all this confusion. It's not even an HRPG. It's just not any kind of RPG.
No, it's...
But it's amazing how many people lump so many things under RPG. And part of it is because people have not clearly defined it. If you try to, my current working definition, let's see if I can pull this up.
It's a 3-page paragraph.
This is trying to get it down to the minimum, and it's still too long. The term role-playing game did not exist prior to the invention of this recreational activity with the release of Dungeons & Dragons publicly in 1974. Now, there's debate about the development of role-playing gaming, but the first published is D&D in 1974. I won't get into the Blackmore thing. All other role-playing game formats are derivative branches from this tabletop shared narrative cooperative game. For the original tabletop RPG format, RPG, TRPG, and some people use ttrpg. Please don't use two Ts. It's just unnecessary. It's totally unneeded. Quote, again, it's tabletop. A seated, cooperative, not competitive, cooperative, interactive, storytelling recreational activity with structured rules in a shared imaginary setting. Participants include a facilitator/referee, game master, and one or more players, which may even be the same in the case of solo adventures, with one or more defined and evolving characters, so defined and evolving, the PC, generally distinctively separate from the player, each taking imaginary actions verbally declared by the player or GM, although with LARP, again, we're talking tabletop here. Mm-hmm. So imaginary actions verbally declared by the player or GM, modified by static and random variables, usually using dice, although plenty of others, and experiencing the imaginary consequences of those actions as defined by the game rules and the GM, with measurable player character and adventure progression, usually tracked by paper and pencil. Because those are all pieces that if that's not there, it's not quite a tabletop role-playing game. How do I get it shorter than that? I have seen I have read through so many articles and postings of people trying to define it, and every time somebody puts it shorter, like, it's a shared narrative cooperative tabletop experience. Well, yeah, but you're leaving out this, and there is no consensus. And I'm less worried about shortness.
Storytelling experience, Piggly Wiggly.
I'm less worried about shortness, conciseness. I want it to be accurate. Because once we get it accurate, where everybody can go, okay, yeah, that's an accurate definition. It may be clunky, it may be not the most elegant and blah, 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 but it is accurate. Then somebody else with other writing skills might be able to make it more concise, creative. Maybe we can use a couple of words that cover several and get it shorter. But until we agree what all the pieces are, that definition is never going to match up. And so and it's been years of doing this, and this keeps changing. Every year I go, well, a little tweak here, a little tweak here. But it's been getting more and more stable. That was an August 2018 revision. It's changing less and less and less as I go through the research and talk to people and work with people, and I go, yeah, okay, there's nothing they would necessarily take out. So if I can get to that bare minimum where people say, yeah, that's all inclusive, I wouldn't take any of those things out, and then they suggest additionals, and I look at, okay, can it still be a role-playing game without adding that? A tabletop role-playing. Let's just start with that, because that's the first version. What is a tabletop role-playing game? Forget all the other hybrids, forget LARP, forget solo adventure, forget electronic role-playing games. If it's a tabletop role-playing game, where's the minimum that you have to have these things for it to really be that, and no more. What's the minimum for that? And I hope that this is an accurate representation of that minimum. Yes, you can have role-playing games with less than that, but it's not really a true tabletop role-playing game. Now it's become some other variant. And I'm not 100% on this. That's what I'm proposing.
And there are ones that kind of skirt the thing that are traditionally known as, like, Amber Diceless.
Right. Doesn't use a randomizing, but that is more of an improvisational theater type thing in a way. So you're getting a little bit into the HRPG thing there. And again, we have to go with, we're talking about the core here, not the infinite variations. What is the core that we can all agree that is a tabletop role-playing game? And hopefully through all this dialogue and publications and streaming all this, we can eventually get some sort of consensus of the core minimum. And then we can look at all the other extra stuff. So anyway, went way over, but it's an important one. I hope you'll cover that in your broadcast tonight as you go through the lecture.
Leave those pages open for me on the computer that I'm working on.
All right, you know what I can do?
It's on this one, right?
No, but I will do that. Tell you what, I'll log into courses, because then you can just run through. I'll do it with my login, and then you can just go through the class.
Oh, that would be the easiest.
We'll still use the presentation because it's better.
Right.
But I'll make it so you can just go through that. Okay. But I'll have you in non-edit mode, so you don't pose my. I can hope this is All right. Well, anyway, we're way over. We went way over, but the whole Stratego thing. Oh. Anyway, and thank you for your feedback. I hope you guys enjoyed. There's lots more. So at 6 to 9 p.m., so coming up in just about half an hour, John?
I will be running a class. This is our RPG theory day. We alternate between theory and actual play. So on the third day, we are going to do a short overview of the history and controversies of role-playing games, and then we are going to get into a dissection of what the different formats are, and he's listed all 5 of them several times, so there will be a quiz.
Well, at least for the volunteers.
Yeah, the volunteers.
Do you know if anybody's showing up in person?
I know nothing.
You know nothing? Have you posted in Discord and such to remind people?
I haven't put out any.
I would recommend doing that. All right, well, thank you. Again, rpgtalkshow.com, RPG Research, RPG Therapeutics. Also check out the dotsrpg.com website for the Braille and other accessible, wonderful products. So RPG Therapeutics LLC, RPG Research, and Dots RPG are all supporters of the RPG Research Patreon, which is part of what the RPG Talk Show is supported by. So they are basically sponsors, in addition to all the wonderful Patreon supporters who kindly donate. RPGresearch.com, or sorry, patreon.com/RPG Research if you'd like to become a Patreon supporter. Get access to the several years of past RPG Talk shows, that some of which I still haven't gotten public. I'm working on it. I really am trying. But wherever you may be well, happy gaming, and namaste.
Dream well.